What's going on, retro gaming fans, and welcome to Rehab Gaming, the channel where we show you the tips and tricks in order to get your retro gaming systems back up and running and to restore them to the condition they deserve to be in. In this video, we're going to cover the complete breakdown and disassembly of a Nintendo 64 console. So stay tuned and we'll get right at it. In order to remove the N64 console shell, you need to turn it over and have access to a 4.5mm security bit driver. There are a total of 6 screws on the bottom side of the console that needs to be removed. 3 of those screws will be located at the front of the console, 1 in the center, and 1 on each side where the circular feet are, and then also in the rear there are a total of 3 screws as well. There's going to be 1 in the center and 1 at each corner on the back of the console. Once you remove all 6 screws, you need to take off both of the round feet at the front side of the console so you don't end up losing them. Once you remove the 2 feet on the bottom front of the console, flip your console over, and we now need to remove the expansion pack or the jumper pack of the system. In order to remove the jumper pack, you can use a flathead screwdriver like I am. Otherwise, you can use the proprietary ejector tool that Nintendo provided with the expansion pack, or you can also use the front cover for the expansion pack and just lift up on the edge of the expansion pack with the corner of the front cover. However, I caution you not to use this method just because of the fact that you can damage the expansion pack cover, and also there's a possibility you could break it using it as a pry tool. Once the jumper or expansion pack has been removed from your console, you can lift straight up on the top shell of the console and set it off to the side. If your console needs a good cleaning like mine does, you need to remove the power button and the reset button on top of the console so you can make sure you get in every nook and cranny to get all of the years of dirt and gunk out. There are 2 clips on each side of the reset button and on each side of the power switch that needs to be pressed in towards the center of the switch in order to remove the buttons. So just apply a little bit of pressure on these tabs and push the button through the top half of the shell until it falls out onto your workspace, and you do this for both the power button and the reset button. For the reset button, I went ahead and flipped the console over and tried using the flathead screwdriver in order to lift the button out of where it seats in the top half of the shell. Now this is a little more difficult. The easiest way to do it is just push through the center of the button and push it down towards the workspace and it'll fall right out. Once you take off the cartridge slot floor, you'll expose the 2 spring-loaded cartridge slot doors located below. Now that the floor of the cartridge slot has been removed, these doors will lift right out of where they're seated in the top half of the shell. Now also keep in mind that there are 2 springs, 1 on each half of the door mechanism, that need to be removed, and if they're rusty, go ahead and soak them in a little bit of vinegar, get the rust cleaned off, and just make sure that you put the springs back on the cartridge doors in the orientation that they came off. Now that the entire top half of the console shell has been disassembled, we're going to turn our attention to the bottom half of the console, which contains the main board of the system. Now, in order to take the heat spreader and RF shielding and main board out of the bottom half of the N64 console, there are numerous screws that you're going to have to remove. I'm going to point out each individual screw in this step that I'm going to have you remove in order to start getting stuff out of the way so we can totally break down the console and remove the main board. Pay attention to the expansion slot up in front of the console. There are a couple of metal pieces that you're going to need to remove. Those pieces are designed to help relieve stress in the area while you're inserting and removing the expansion card. These are easy to lose. Just make sure you keep track of them and that you send them off to the side in a safe place. So once you have all of the screws removed that I pointed out, you can remove the heat spreader for the system. There are a couple more screws that are exposed after we remove that heat spreader, and these screws need to be removed as well. This is another one of those metal pieces by the expansion slot that you need to keep track of. I like to remove it after I get the heat spreader off because it gives you a little more room to get a screwdriver underneath in order to lift it up off the RF shielding. This second metal bracket that was below the one we just took off can only be removed once you get the heat shield out of the way, so just use a flathead screwdriver and lift it right up. Now we're going to remove the 4 screws that hold in the multi-out for the audio-video connection and the power port into place. Once you have these 4 screws removed, you can lift out the entire main board with the RF shielding. Now take note, once you remove the main board, there is going to be a plastic piece for the AV multi-out that's going to come with it. Just make sure you remove it and set it off to the side. Once the board is out of the console, you might have the bottom RF shield fall off the bottom side of the board on you. Just make sure you keep track of it and remove the top RF shielding and clean them as needed, or do some rust treatment with some household vinegar. Also, there are these 2 brass colored metal clips that sit down on the bottom half of the casing. Make sure that you remove these as well and keep track of them, because once the bottom RF shielding is removed, they will fall out of the case shell. Near the front of the console, below where the expansion port is, there is a clear piece of plastic. This plastic is a diffuser for the power LED, so you can see the power LED from the front of the console. This will lift straight out. Just make sure that you lift this part out and set it off to the side so you don't lose it while you're cleaning the case bottom. So now that you have everything removed out of both halves of the console shell, we're going to take a look at the main board. So I went ahead and left the top RF shielding on the main board so I can show you exactly where the RF shielding actually makes contact with the heat sinks for the processor, RAM chips, and graphics chips down underneath. Now, a lot of people will remove these aluminum heat spreaders from the chips in order to replace the thermal pads that are underneath. In order to do this, you'll need a hot air gun so you can try and work loose those heat spreading pads that are underneath, so you don't end up pulling the chips off the board or damaging any of the pins for the chips. One of the biggest problems with the Nintendo 64 consoles is they ended up getting a lot of dirt and debris down into the game cartridge slot connector. These are actually removable once you have the board and the case totally disassembled, and the cartridge slot connector will actually lift straight up off the board. So in order to clean it and make sure that you get all the debris out, I recommend lifting this straight off the board using a soft bristle toothbrush and some isopropyl alcohol to clean out the inside of the connector and to also clean up the connection pins that are located on the main board underneath the connector. So that wraps it up for this project. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget we have our own Facebook page and Twitter, and we will have those links in the video description down below. So without further ado, thank you for stopping by, and we hope you have a wonderful day.